Now we're on. Okay. Google APIs. Imagine trying to deploy services like these on your own. The levels of redundancy, the years of development. I used to struggle for the budget to get a second server, even for mission-critical applications. Yet thousands, tens of thousands of companies still operate that way. And eventually they'll become a really huge market for transitions to the cloud. I've been given a lot of opportunities to learn things while working with Google. I've signed some severe confidentiality agreements. I really can't blog anymore, can't publish anything, can't talk in my sleep. But I can share this. I know Google's passionate about performance and reliability. If you can come up with something that shaves 10 milliseconds off an operation, there's cheers all around. I've never seen anything like it. So that's one of the reasons I would say I think Google's the long-term best candidate to be the cloud, their APIs. There'll be others in narrow niches, but Google will be the gold standard. And learning to make good use of the Google APIs is a competitive advantage. Because right now, for the price of an email address, on App Engine, we can have 10 of our own virtual servers. Each one can handle 7,400 requests per minute through a 10-gig pipeline. It's hard to compete against that kind of, it's hard to compete with those kinds of free resources if you didn't have them. This is a short list of what we consider to be essential API tools. For us, the basics are App Engine, Base, Gadgets, Maps, and Spreadsheets. If we get good with these, we can cover a lot of ground. Probably a lot of you know these APIs better than I do. And I'm not here because I'm some kind of expert on anything. I think the reason I'm here is because I've been in the industry so long, and I just work really hard. I work like crazy. So I'm probably telling you some things maybe you already knew that. And hopefully, though, there'll be something in here that you can take away that'll be helpful to you. But I'll go through it. Google Base lets us put just about any kind of content online. And again, for the price of an email address, we can put 1 million records online. Lots of major companies already have their products on Google Base. So when it's time to make an ad for them, we need to understand how to get their items from Google Base. Plenty of clients still have their own APIs, but Base is an important one to know. In my case, Google Gadgets are the most certain way to generate traffic. Last March, just from Google Gadgets, it generated 1 million visitors on my websites, and over 19 million page views. And it was all free traffic. I didn't have to pay for any of it. Gadgets are also used as ads, and we'll look at some examples of those later. Google Maps just keeps getting better and better. After seeing that keynote and seeing the Rasmussens in action, I understand why that's such a good API. For me, Google Spreadsheets have become like the Swiss Army knife of applications, especially when we need a quick solution. Some small data set. Just about every client has somebody that knows how to use a spreadsheet. Jerome will go into a lot more details about AdSense and the affiliates. YouTube has some really neat API tricks. Picasso, of course, is great for handling images. And Google Friend Connect, it's about a year old. Has anybody ever heard or used Google Friend Connect? I still run into people who've never heard of it, but it basically it lets people join your site, and then you can do persistence. Let them rate things, have polls, and it's very easy to set up and do. And they can log in from other social services other than just Google's. We've broken monetization down for our talk today into two sections, indirect and direct. By direct, we mean people paying us to do certain things for them. By indirect, we mean the AdSense and affiliate programs. We won't be mentioning some of the others since this is a Google presentation, like Amazon. when working directly for clients, it's common to quote an hourly rate. And that's, for us, that's a little bit less attractive because it puts us in competition with every other programmer in the world directly, especially with the low-cost labor markets. When we started making gadget ads for Google, they did want to pay us by the hour, and it made perfect sense because no one really knew how long it would take to do this. We were doing things that hadn't been, putting things together that hadn't been done quite that way before. And one of the first things I learned is there's a huge difference between making a gadget for fun and making an ad. An ad, the appearance is absolutely fixed. The tolerance is plus or minus 0 pixels. You have to nail it exactly. The first project I worked on was a great one to learn from because it had some classic challenges. When I think I was the third developer, I don't know what happened to the first one. The second one said he was on vacation. And the day I started, we were over budget and like 4 weeks behind. And the client was communication challenged. They would burn a whole week between questions. And when the answer finally arrived, it might be one sentence in all caps, just match the mock-up. So when we started, I tried to let the Google folks know I wasn't sure if I was really professional enough to deal with their clients directly. I'd had at that point, about 25 years experience dealing with the table pounders in Detroit, but I'd never worked with anybody in the advertising industry before. And I imagined it would be a lot different. It turns out clients really, or customers really aren't that different in the different industries. And in advertising, there's less table pounding. One point about fixed price bids is they make it easier for people to buy from you. You always have to imagine what it's like for your contact to go get approval to pay you to do something. So if you're talking in terms of an hourly rate, it's almost like asking for a blank check. Because you really don't know how long it's going to take, and you can say, well, not to exceed this much, or something like that. But a fixed price bid makes it a lot easier for them to go to their vice president or whoever has to approve it and say, okay, we need X dollars to do this project. And then they can decide, is it really worth it? Do we want to spend that money on it? Okay, in our case, connecting to markets to me, is the hardest part of having your own business. For us, we were really lucky. We had Google reached out to us. We had demonstrated some proficiency with the APIs. When the Gadget API was new, I started making some gadgets, kind of little games and fun things to impress my daughters. I might spend like a month working on something, getting it ready, and they would be impressed for about 2 minutes. But after a while, it became challenging. A lot of times I do things, can I do this? Can we do that? And I started turning out 1 or 2 gadgets a week. And so when they decided to try to use gadgets for ads, they reached out to about 8 or 12 of us in that category to find out if we wanted to do it, for money, to do it professionally. I think one thing I'd like to share, throughout my life, I've told people that find what you love to do and do it with all your might, and success will follow from that. And I think it's true. It was true in our case. When we talk about building alliances, I've been in a lot of situations where the customer-vendor relationship is adversarial. Like it's a fight all the time. There's arguments, dishonesty, and so forth. What I've found works better is to try to make an alliance. Try to find ways where everybody comes out a winner and that they're really glad they did business with you. We have to keep asking ourselves, given the level of service we're providing, would this customer decide to do business with us again? The early gadget ad projects were really hard for us because we were putting things together in ways that hadn't been done before. Clients would get anxious. would take 3 or 4 tries to get something right. I make so many mistakes. One time it was late at night, and we were working on something. We found out what to do, and it meant redoing a lot of code. I mean, a lot, and it was going to take hours. And I was chatting with the contact at Google. Okay, and I said, "Okay, I'll start on it now, and it'll be ready in the morning." And he chatted back. He said, "You're crazy, aren't you?" And of course, he was right, but I think he meant it in a good way. But that's an example of providing service above and beyond what their expectations might be. Once you've connected with the market and you start doing contract work, an important point is to manage client expectations. I learned that by watching other people doing it. I noticed they were doing that. And I think the important point there is you don't want to set the clients up to be disappointed. My natural tendency is to put the very best spin on things, and sometimes things actually do work out exactly perfect, but usually not. So it's better not to set them up to be disappointed. More often than not, the people who decide to place contracts aren't engineers themselves. They're probably experts at something else. So you have to find out how to communicate with them at their comfort level. One time I was talking to a client, and I said something about the URL. And he said, "Oh, whoa, don't get all technical on me." So you have to find out where they're at and work there. I've seen sales guys shoot themselves in the foot by trying to wow the CEO with the latest technical terms and a lot of acronyms that, he or she, they're not going to know what that means. And it just doesn't, bluffing just doesn't work very well. Estimating cost, the only way I know to learn to do it is to practice. There's kind of a laundry list there of different things you might think of to take into account, but the important part is to practice. I practice estimating how long is it going to take me to do this, even when it doesn't matter, even if it's a project I'm doing just for fun. And what I found is, for me, about 25% of the time, of the total time of a project, about 25% I spent getting to a working first draft. And then about 50% of the time is for debugging and meeting all the requirements. Sorry. And the remaining 25% is testing. And, of course, support goes on to the last user is dead. So the best way to learn to estimate well is to practice. Last year, one example, I missed an estimate literally by half. And there were some communication issues. There were some open-ended areas in the requirements. The client interpreted them completely differently than I did. So, half pay is better than no pay. At least I got paid for it. But the lesson learned was to really nail down the requirements as well as I can. Scheduling, in our case, most of the projects are due yesterday. But so really all you can do is level the work as best you can. Selling, the people would give you, there's all kinds of seminars and books about selling. They'll give you all kinds of advice about it. So don't take my word for it. Shop around, see what really works for you. But this is what's always worked for me. For me, the most important thing is to be absolutely, totally honest with the clients. I've been in situations where my boss, at times in my job would really want me to lie. They'd say, okay, the lie is, this is what we're going to tell them. And I would never go along with that, and I've actually been fired for not going along with that. But I think people are glad to do business with me once they learn that about me, that I'm not going to fake them out. Communicating clearly is important. I wish I were doing better at it right now, but I think we covered that point. I can give you one important point I want to make from this slide. And we heard it this morning. They were talking about that wave, really cool stuff, and we get to see it today before it's like even in an alpha release. So for in my mind, what I'm thinking is, oh, this is great. I can be ready when our customers arrive. I'll be prepared. I'll understand how to do it, how to work with it. So the point is, figure out what your customers need next year and start preparing for that now. The point about learning what the market will bear and bid at or just below that, just a quick point. I don't want to be the lowest bidder unless it's a government project. I'd rather be the preferred bidder. Which projects to tackle as work starts as you start to get more opportunities to bid on work, you have to decide what you really want to go after and what you don't. So kind of the questions we would go through is this project in our niche? Meaning we're going to give it, if it is, we're going to give it the most aggressive price and the shortest lead time. It's something, we know how to do it, and we can do it as well or better than anybody else. If the project is close to our niche in the neighborhood, then it's similar. We'll try to come in with a really good price and a decent lead time. If it's something we'd really like to start doing, you could consider buying the business, almost give it away, just to get the experience at doing it. And some projects, if you see there's something frightening about it, sometimes it's hard to tell the client, no, I don't want to bid on that. It depends on your relationship with them, but you may not be in a position where it's comfortable to say no. So what we've done is, at times, is maybe say, okay, yes, but we'll bid just on this part of the project. Or, yes, but here's our price. And the price is set such that if we do get it, okay, we won't mind too much. I don't know, everybody here, I guess, you have a job, you're working for somebody, or maybe you're working for yourself. And somebody will call an astute observer of patterns, pointed this set of transitions out to me. That, starting off, you're like somebody that's just a programmer doing things because they're interesting or fun. At that stage, you don't want to worry so much about the monetization angle. You make money accidentally or if you have to somehow, through AdSense or whatever. Then as a developer, you start to do things where some problem you have solved because it was interesting, that solution you provided will help somebody else, and they'll be willing to pay for that solution. So in those, you can start picking up some momentum that way. Then once you've done that for a while, you feel like, okay, this is getting more serious. And it becomes very important to cultivate repeat business at that point. I want to tell one story. I was working with a client, and they fielded like 5 different gadget ads, kind of all across the map possibilities. And they ran those for about a month, and then they picked one winner of the 5 and said, okay, we're going to go with this one. And then they ran it for about a month, and they decided they wanted to make a change. The way their ads are structured, there's 4 different topics and 8 different sizes. So the change they needed was going to hit 32 different places. So they wrote an email, how long is this going to take? How much is it going to cost? Is it difficult? And the actual change they needed was one of those one line of code type changes. And I responded, I said, oh, it's done, no charge. It took about a minute. And I already had a program in place to handle the repetitive stuff. And I think they were shocked that was the answer. It's done and there's no charge. And what they learned about us at that point is that we weren't going to take advantage of them on some little something. They believe us when we say, and so now when we say that change is going to cost several $1,000s, they believe it because they know we're going to tell them the truth about the ones that are really trivial. And they've become our second biggest customer. And actually, I think if anybody else, IBM or whoever, went to them and said, okay, we can do what Echo 3 is doing, it'd be a really hard sell for them. We've really developed some loyalty. This is kind of a short list of some lessons learned. The example I just gave, using software to automate repetitive tasks, you can see where that helped. And we told the story about looking out for open-ended statements and requirements. One way I shoot myself in the foot, I try to turn things around really quickly. And recently I published a really big bug in kind of a high-profile project. And you know what? It tested, it looked okay and everything, but I realized I was looking at some cached results. And so anyway, there's no such thing as too much testing. Sometimes with clients, they'll want to, say, do a new ad, and they want to talk about it on the phone. And while you're talking, you haven't even seen a mock-up yet. Hey, can you give me a quick estimate? Some kind of ballpark thing. So one thing I found is, if I think something's going to take me 3 days, I should say 6 days. And if they want to say, well, worst case, so for me, I multiply that by 4. And the last part, they told me to use a picture. So the one thing I found, I think I've blown some business by using rough drafts. I don't have any problem with a rough draft. I get it. Okay, yeah, the images will look better later, and we can have somebody that's really good with graphics come back and do this. But one lesson learned is use a wireframe. Some people just aren't, they're not going to play with you. They're not going to be that imaginative about how this might look. And big warm-up for Jerome coming up now. Be glad to hear. Talking about Gadget Ads a lot, these are some of the typical Gadget Ad features. That they're contextual. And I'm sure everybody here understands that concept. Geo-awareness is becoming more and more important with ads. I'm not supposed to mention certain client names, but for example, there's one very large online auction company that sells cars online. And they, of course, when somebody buys a car, they don't want to drive 6 hours to pick it up. They want something in their location. So the ads are from the AdWords network are given these parameters: city, region, or latitude and longitude. It's getting easier and easier to find out where the user is. Gadget Ads typically have to query a custom API or Google base with, probably with a keyword. And then obviously it has to display something, the items, the image, or where it's located. And Jerome's going to take it from here. So.
Thank you, Michael. So yeah, as Michael mentioned, usually we cannot show or tell what the customer are. The Google account team for kayak.com was nice enough to get us permission to show you this one. So as Michael mentioned, and I'll use the mouse because pointing at both screens will be difficult. Oops, don't start blinking. Okay, so this is a gadget ad. So, be a bit imaginative. Picture that to be on a review website, for example. You are on a website talking about museum in Paris, and you have this banner ad showing on top. So, as Michael mentioned, we have the geo information about where the user is. So, in this case, we know you are close to San Francisco. So, what the gadget ad is doing, we find the closest airport from a database from where you are. And we populate that as a from destination. For the target destination, we have keywords from the context of the page. And here in this case, we would trigger that you're on a page talking about Paris. And with this information, contextual data, we can go and query the kayak.com APIs and find what are the good deals they have in their listing with these two from and to pairs. And what is pretty cool with this type of work is we provide some real value to the user as well. You are on a website learning about Paris, about cool stuff you could do over there. If we show you information saying that you can get a ticket for this price, it's probably some valuable data for you. And of course, for the customer for Kayak, it's also very valuable because you are more likely to interact with this type of ad than with just some text that is not really contextual. So it's just an example. We've been doing a couple of dozen of those. Again, if we were to tell you about some of those, we'd have to kill you, so it would not be very pleasant for this demonstration. So Michael discussed extensively about what we've done for consulting, contracting. We've been also doing different type of work in the past few years, and especially creating our own products. In fact, that's how we started. We've been very active on the iGoogle scene, creating gadgets for your personalized home pages. And when you do that, what is pretty cool is you don't have a customer telling you what to do. It's your own ideas that you can implement. You can be creative. And the issue is then to be able to monetize on these ideas. So the concept is very different, right? Nobody will be paying the bill for you to develop the product, so you'll have to invest some time. But it plays very well when you're doing consulting or contracting because you'll have some downtime. For some weeks, you won't have any consulting to do. That's a very good time to reapply techniques you learned on customer projects or to learn on new technologies. You can try doing your own products. So we'll discuss two main ways of monetizing using ad networks like AdSense, which pay per click, PPC. And the other one we'll look at as well is using affiliate marketing, where you create some links to some products on some retail website, and you get paid per customer action. Usually it's if they buy something or if they sign up or something like that. Okay, so let's focus first on iGoogle and what we've been learning and doing for these past few years. Main issue you have on iGoogle, you don't have a full web page to play with. You have a very small constrained space, and you are competing with many other gadgets all around. So the best way to monetize on an iGoogle gadget is to do that elsewhere. In many situations, you'll be doing a gadget because you have a blog or some content on a website, and you just want to allow your users to syndicate your content and to see what you have new when they visit iGoogle. When you do that, your user will be more reminded about your content through the day when they visit iGoogle, and you will get some quality traffic from iGoogle to your site. Something else that is pretty cool with that is once you have enough users using your gadget and they are giving good comments about your gadget, you will be ranked pretty good in the directory, meaning new users will find your tool, your content, and you are pretty likely to get more users. More users, more traffic, more money. So, yeah, again, if you have a website where you can monetize, let's take this approach. Monetize on the full page of your content, of your blog, and just use the gadget to get some traffic. We'll talk in a few seconds about how to monetize in a gadget, which is more tricky. But quick tips for iGoogle. What we found works well is don't try to do something too big at first. Try to find a niche and be good at doing these little, small specialties. And then you can always expand. That's always easy to do. Something else also to consider when you are just starting doing development, playing with these type of technologies, you're playing, right? But when you start monetizing, the users you will get become your customers. That's thanks to these people that they will be making some money. So treat them as such, listen to what they have to say. Make sure that they have a way to email you, to contact you with some feedback, some questions. Also, you have to monitor the web pages in the directory where they can post comment and rating, and try to, on a regular basis, reply to that. If they have questions, answer them. If you have concerns, also address that. So I think it's very important to be successful. These users are your customers, so take good care of them. So let's now discuss about how to monetize inside the gadget. So we'll go through a few examples. This first one is one of the first I developed. It's a wall clock. It became very popular. And on this one, I've been using AdSense as a way to monetize. So AdSense, the way it works, it looked at the context, the keywords around the content, and find something relevant. If you've been using AdSense on websites and you start using AdSense on a gadget, you'll be probably very shocked at first to see the CTR, the click-through rate. It's extremely low. On a website, usually you see a few % of the impression convert to a click. On AdSense, at first, I was very surprised to see that we have a number of about 0.05%. So yeah, it is very, very low. But when you think about it, it makes sense. On Google, you have so much content on the page, you don't have the user focused on your specific gadget all the time. Even worse than that, you could have your gadget positioned below the page. You have to scroll down to see it. Meaning most of the time, the user won't see your gadget or your ad. Something else to keep in mind as well, most users, they keep their Google page up all day long, and you probably notice that every 7 or 10 minutes, the page refreshes by itself. Meaning you will generate many, many impressions when nobody is looking at the page. So that's what explains this low CTR, so nothing to be concerned about. That's the way it is. Okay, just to give you some guidelines, I don't know if it's that useful, but what we've been saying for monetization, you can expect to get about $15 per month per 1,000 users. When we talk 1,000 users here, it will be active users. If you look in your analytics account, they show you the evolution per day. It kind of takes the peak, and you can assume that the peak is your active user base. Okay? This number is, of course, it's a ballpark figures. If you have a gadget with some content that match very high-paying keywords, you may think something better than we do, and good for you. But I think some people also can see something less than that. It's just probably an average. All right. Google released not that long ago the canvas view for iGoogle. So that's a pretty powerful feature. If you have a gadget that needs more space, you can define an alternate view, which will be using kind of a full page. You still have the Google logo on top and a sidebar on the left-hand side, but you have much more real estate to play with. That's an example from Lab Pixies. It's one of the top developers for iGoogles, and they've made very good use of that. They have a little game that on the iGoogle page is just a small image. You cannot do anything with it, but when you click on it, it opens this full-time view, full-screen view, and they show you the game plus some big-size ad on the side. We didn't implement that. I don't think you did that either. No, but I'm pretty sure it's working pretty well for them. It's probably about the same as a web page. On the other hand, the user will see the ad only when they interact with the gadget. So we're pretty much back to when you have a gadget driving traffic to your website. Another example I wanted to show you is using affiliate links. So it's a small gadget I've designed just for fun at first. I'm a big fan of wood.com, and wanted to see every day, every morning, what they were selling. So I designed this small gadget, and it started working pretty well. So I was thinking, how can I monetize? And at the time, I already had the word clocks with AdSense. And even though it was working well, I was still getting, weekly hate emails from users saying, it's dirty, don't put AdSense on Google. People don't like it that much, of course. It takes some real estate. So I wanted to experiment with something different. And, I thought because Wood.com customer, I know them pretty well. They're in the US. There are people who like technologies. If I can show you some product on Amazon, Buy.com, or you name it, they'll probably be interested. If I find the good deals of the moment, that would be good value for them. So I started building that manually every day, finding products and putting links upstairs. And these links are created through their affiliate websites of, as I mentioned, Amazon or others. So when someone clicks on the link, and if the customer later on buy a product on the site I'm sending them to, we get a commission ranging from 1% to 8%, roughly. What is, I think the good takeaway from that is I never had anybody complain about this type of advertising in a gadget. It's small, it's looking pretty nice. So it's been about 2 years and I've been doing that and never received a single email from anybody. On the other hand, the revenue is not as good either. Doing this type of work, I'm getting about $2 to $3 per month per 1,000 users. But I think, at least the look and feel is good and the users are happy. So I think it's a good drawback. If you want to try to play with this type of stuff, what I've seen, Amazon.com by far is what is paying the best for affiliate marketing. just because most people will buy something from Amazon. So if you send them to other smaller websites like buy.com, u8.com, Tiger Direct, and a few other bunch, the conversion is not as good. And so, by the way, Amazon, they have their own affiliate program. If you want to go and affiliate with the others, you have to use brokers like Commission Junction, the CG, Linkshare.com as well is another brokers. And I'm talking here about technology products, but if your site is about babies or about fashion, they have affiliate programs with almost any type of retailers. I was planning to have time to experiment before I.O. Something new, but I did not. So something I would like to play with is Xanox. It's another one of these brokers for affiliate. They just released a few weeks ago what they call the Xanox Web Services. And it's a nice API that seems to allow you to get products based on some searches you're doing, meaning you can rotate products automatically through their system. Just right now, what I'm doing is I'm pulling every hour all the best sellers from a bunch of retailers, and then I'm picking random products to make them rotate every 2 or 3 minutes to make sure I try to get people interest. Okay. So we talked about iGoogle so far. Everything we discussed about applies as well to open social applications. Open social is pretty much gadgets running on social website, like the MySpace, the Orkut, the High5, and you name it. The only difference I think that you will face is each social container has its own policies and terms of services. So they will tell you exactly what you cannot do or what you can do, and you have to spend quite some time to review the document because they are pretty extensive. The common ground is you will not be able to put ads on what they call the profile view. The profile view, they say it's a user property, you cannot put anything there. You can only monetize in what they call the canvas view when it's in full screen. But here again, you can use AdSense or affiliate marketing or anything you would like. Okay, let me see where we are. Yeah, I wanted to show you something that I think it's interesting. First, it's pretty nice looking. So it's over a year, the evolution of AdSense, for some gadgets. The blue color shows you the daily page views. So you see it's a pretty nice growth in average. In red, I'm showing the evolution of the click-through rate. So as you can see, it's not moving exactly the same as the number of views per day. And in green at the bottom, I'm showing the evolution of the daily earnings. I think it's interesting because you would expect that to correlate pretty well, and it's not the case at all. This curve moves in all directions kind of by themselves. So what I want to point out here is don't have too much expectation. You will get what they give you, but you will be facing a situation where there will be maybe no ads available for the keywords of your content at some point, which means that you will see a drop in revenue, or there will be no high-paying ads available to you, but you will get low-paying one, which maybe will appeal more to your user, meaning more clicks and less money. Something else we've seen as well, and it was pretty unfortunate. At some point, it lasted a few weeks, there was a pretty bad bug in AdSense. And for my US customers, they were seeing ads in Chinese, German, and other foreign languages. So as you can bet, you don't get nice conversion with that. If they cannot read what you are showing to them, they won't click on it. So just keep in mind, it won't be a steady growth when you go through more users. Let's talk a little bit about maps, because that's an API where Google is number one for mapping now. So if you do any mashups or any website where you want to show location-based information, you'll be most likely using Google Maps. They just released something, I believe it's still in beta right now, but it seems to be very interesting. As of today, if you want to monetize on a site with maps, you have to put banners outside the map. You're losing some real estate because you could have made the map bigger. And also, it's pretty difficult for AdSense to pick up what the content is talking about. A map is just graphic information. There is no real keyword to latch on. what they're releasing is map ad units. So this time the ads are showing up inside the map area. You can see that on the corner, right corner here. Okay, I will stop touching. Okay, so not only you don't lose real estate, but better than that, the ad content is using the geolocation. So as you pan through the map, they will get new content which is relevant to where you are, what is the location you are looking at. So what we heard is they've seen people in the beta program seeing their ad revenues going up 10 times by just moving the ad from outside to inside the map. That's pretty promising, so I'm looking forward to trying that very soon. Another thing they just released, and I don't have a slide yet, is they offer, or they will offer, a new overlay which they call the Google bar. And it's a new overlay that you will put on the lower left corner and which gives you the ability to add a search box in the map. And if someone searches on this search box, land to a page of results, and then if they click on the affiliate link from Google, you will get a commission. So that's many if, right? But yeah, it's something small that won't take much space on your map and which may lead to some additional revenue. All right, so we talked about quite a few stuff, gadget, applications, and monetization. All this stuff are still pretty small projects that you can put together in a few days. If you have a bigger idea, you have a pretty nice web app application you think you would like to develop and make it like a new startup to do a real product that maybe you will sell or something. What was difficult a few years ago is you had to shell out quite some money to get started. You had to rent, hardware or rent virtual servers. You had to pay development environment and stuff. What is very good for us today is we have all these great technologies from Google available without paying a penny, right? For hosting, now we have App Engine with Java or Python. As long as you are in the ramp-up mode, you won't pay anything because you have free quota, which let you do pretty much, it let you go a long way already. Hosting videos can be extremely difficult and expensive because it's large data, a lot of bandwidth, and YouTube helped you a long way with that. And same for GWT. Yes, there was many sessions during these past 2 days about GWT. Very great Ajax framework that let you do cool stuff. So we talk about maps, Authum, and many others. And I can really testify about that. I'm just in the process. We started a few months ago to create a new startup. My nice T-shirt here, Team Zone. It's a video discussion solution for private discussion. We want to enable remote teams to better collaborate with recorded conversations. So we went through that, and it helped us a long way to get something running without, kicking out any big bucks to start with. So something I wanted to add before I hand back the mic to Michael. What has been very useful for us to start with Michael, when we first did some Google gadgets and stuff like that before to get some clients, is participating in the Google groups. So I'm sure you know that every single Google technology, they have their own Google group for people to ask questions and to get some help. I think it's very important that if you are serious about that, spend some time, learn from this group to start with, ask questions. And as you grow and you learn some, you get some expertise, start giving back to the community and helping them as well. Start answering questions and showing that you are an active participant. That's the best way to show the world that you are an expert in this area. They have a ranking system where, people can put you stars, and you'll be also getting more visible in the group. We had many clients contact us because they've seen us in these groups as active participants, and also Google at some time, they name the API gurus for these groups, and it's very good. You'll see as well some customers sometimes posting some requests for quotes. They say, okay, I would like to do this. Contact me and let me know how much it will cost. So, yeah, I think it's very important. That's something you want to look at definitely if you're serious about doing business around these technologies. And I think that's it for me. Michael, back to you.
Well, it's almost over. Okay. Again, the idea of this talk was for people interested in building a business. And the whole question is the business you build sustainable? You know, not everybody's cut out to have their own business. I'm kind of stubborn, and I don't like people telling me what to do, different things like that. I don't mind working by myself. So not everybody has those characteristics. Where I live, the bank's right across the street. They know me. If I wanted to go borrow money to start a business, they'd loan it to me, as long as I'm willing to put up 60% of my own personal assets as collateral. But it's not for everybody. If I did go for a loan, I didn't have to for this, but if I did, there'd be forms and questions, and let's see the business plan, and all those sorts of things. But it all boils down to, is this business going to be sustainable? And for me, the definition of sustainable is it keeps meeting the break-even point, and generate enough sales to cover the cost of doing business, plus a living for you and any employees you might have. So the real question then, in any business venture you're thinking about starting, will be, will the business provide enough value to keep customers paying as much or more as your break-even point from now on? So that was the point of the talk. And thank you so much for your patience. I wish I was a better speaker, but I appreciate you hanging in there with us. And I guess if anybody had a question, this would be the time. It's okay if you don't have questions.
Could you go back to the slide that had the statistics of the earnings? Yeah. Will you have your increase there? The red goes up?
Yes.
Money goes down?
Yes.
Do you think that's a result of the people who place the ads cut back on the amount that they put in due to the fact that they're getting excessive clicks, so they're spending through their budgets before they get any decent returns?
That could be one explanation. The other thing is maybe one advertiser was paying a lot of money, just had no budget anymore, and we are getting different ads now, which may be more appealing, the stuff that people are more likely to be interested in, but pay far less. In this case, we would probably pay 4 times less because we double the clicks and we get half the money. Again, we can try to explain, but it won't help us out because the thing is, it's a black box, So it's print money for you, get it, and run with it. That's all.
Another way that can happen, that could be somebody's new campaign. I remember one time an automotive company started showing costs for paying for impressions on one of my sites. And I saw something similar to that. I kept checking into it. I was seeing an ad I didn't see before, and I realized they were paying not for clicks, but just for impressions. So that could just be somebody had a big campaign.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other question? Oops. Yes, please.
I was just curious what your thoughts would be, if, let's say, if like a 2 developer team is there and they're creating gadgets for either iGoogle versus a social network, so what will be the, ROI if you were to compare, just we have X number of hours to put in, which way would we rather go, creating little gadgets for social networks versus, an iGoogle, what?
Okay, my take on that is if you are starting something today, you will have a bigger reach on social networks. iGoogle, we're talking about tens of millions of people. With social network, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, right? With little more work, you can move an application you've done for MySpace. You can move it to High5, to many other places. So, yeah, if you are starting something today, think social. That's where you should be. For us, when we started 4 years ago, iGoogle was the place to be.
So you are venturing in that space now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
But on the other hand, as I was mentioning, open social is, in my opinion, a superset of the iGoogle. So if you can do both, do it, right? The more places you are seeding your application, the better reach you will have.
Great. Thanks.
You're welcome. Yeah. All right. If there's another question, you can still find us around at the conference. And yeah, we'll be very, pleased to talk to you guys about more details. Thank you.
Presentation. Just kidding.